Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Strategy Session. Tonight, Joe and Stuart are both in transit, but I am joined by the great Tom Nichols, former Naval War College professor, former, or current, rather, writer at The Atlantic, some of the smartest foreign policy stuff you can read out there. Tom, thank you for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. We are going to take a night where we're going to take a beat on all of the domestic screeching in this country and talk about the important things that are being ignored when it comes to this national security of this place. And our president, his defense establishment, do not seem to be up to the task right now. And so I wanted to run through a bunch of the stories we've been talking about, kind of a bunch of them. Let's start out with Donald Trump's trip to the United Kingdom this week, because as you said just before this, they're managing him, they're patting him on the head. Talk to us about like how they've learned to play him.
Well, 5 years of dealing with him, they figured it out. If he comes to town and you make him happy and he feels welcomed and gets the big parade, and I mean it is like dealing with a small child. You give him a pony ride, um, you show him around. It makes him easier to deal with. That's just, I think everyone who's dealt with Trump in an official capacity. Well, I don't know about unofficial capacity, but it seems
Right.
to me that all the world leaders who have dealt with Trump in an official capacity have figured out that, having Angela Merkel yell at him, or read him the riot act doesn't work with him. He clams up. But that you can get a long way again if you take him to a parade. Again, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm talking about a small child.
Donald,
Take him
get
to
on the pony. Get on the pony.
take him to a parade, give him a pony ride, let him meet the big guy with the crown and the braids,
Right.
and he's happy. And I don't blame anybody for doing this, because dictators and democracies alike have figured this out about Donald
Right.
Trump, and they both treat him the same way.
And I think Starmer is looking for any kind of way to shortcut this sort of Euro MAGA or excuse me, this UK MAGA that seems to be rising there. I just came back from a week over there, and it is abundantly apparent that the toolbox of MAGA, of the populism, the anti-immigrant stuff, is now the centerpiece of the Reform Party's attempt to take power, and it's probably going to work. I think Starmer looked at this trip and cashed in whatever favors he had left with the palace and said, "You got to help me out here, guys."
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. That he called Buckingham Palace and said, "It's going to suck, but we got to do it."
Right.
The thing about immigration, I mean, first thing I thought when I saw this march and it was led by Tommy Robinson, was I thought, "Wow, he's still around."
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
didn't. I kind of lost track. I said, "Yeah, Tommy Robinson. I remember that guy."
I think the last time I thought about the guy was like 2018 or something, when he was
Yeah,
making some noise and it just disappeared.
but the great thing about immigration and crime as issues for MAGA and for Trump is that there will always be immigrants and there will always be crime.
Right.
So, it's not, I mean, it's always a go-to, because, that has a resonance, unlike deficits, unlike, budget fights, even unlike abortion. I mean, abortion, once Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it,
Right.
it has now, gone to this hand-to-hand
Right.
political combat in the
State combat.
states. People have kind of, it's sort of passed out of the consciousness. But immigrants and crime, they always exist. They're always going to be here. It's an easy button to push.
I will say this about being over in the UK for a week, and the top story in the news was that the deputy prime minister had not paid a sufficient amount of property taxes. The second story was over the technicalities of a tube strike in London. And it was, I never woke up in the morning and thought, oh my God, did Trump nuke the moon?
Right.
Or have we now given Alaska back to Russia, or anything like that? I wonder if they recognize, if they elect Farage and Reform, that they're going to end up in the same forever circus of distractions and loud noises and explosions and exit stage right screaming.
But they won't be stuck with him. Um,
True. True.
that's the thing. I mean, once Farage, if they actually elect Farage if this ever, I mean, and the actual support of the Reform Party is a lot smaller than that parade.
For sure.
But
they got 4 seats in Parliament.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, this is a tiny fringe party, but the other thing you can do is you can call elections, and and then they're out again. So I think, I actually worry less about the rightward drift of Europe. I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at maybe even 7 or 8 years ago, it looked like it was just unstoppable. And in the end, the Europeans, whenever they get close enough to that stove, because they are Europeans, because they have a better sense of this than we do, every time they get close enough to that stove, they go, my grandparents told me how this ends. I'm probably not gonna do this today.
I have a friend who's an Italian government official he's retired now, but he was active during I've known him for 40 years. He was active during the period Bannon was over there. And he goes, look, there will always be some people who want to like have a little Mussolini light. There's always a little streak of that. But if it goes past a certain level, we will pull the trigger on it. We will pull back from it. We will stop it. And they did. I mean, Meloni is farther to the right than a lot of recent folks in recent memory, but she's not their dream date in every conceivable respect.
And on Ukraine, she's a far better ally to Ukraine
by far.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit because Ukraine has reshaped American foreign policy from the top down, and you've written a ton about this. Your piece, and folks, I recommend it about the Russia's reckless provocation. They have now decided to start lobbing drones into Poland, and other NATO nations are now going to face the same pressure test. It's the old, the bayonet keeps going in until it hits bone somewhere.
Right.
So, Tom, talk to us about Putin feels entirely, I think, liberated from any sort of national check by the American government or the American military right now. Walk us through how embarrassing this is for America as a foreign policy disaster, that Trump is shrugging this off, the most sacred NATO obligation, and the only people that ever called for it have been us, and they delivered on invoking Article 5. Talk to us about where you see this moment in Europe with Putin and Trump right now.
I was actually going to take issue with you about something you said at the start when you said Ukraine has reordered, foreign policy in America from the top down. It really hasn't. I mean, in the sense that most Americans believe in NATO. Most Americans believe we should support Ukraine. Most Americans do not trust Putin and the Kremlin and think of Russia now as an enemy, something that kind of breaks my heart, because for 20 years after the Cold War, I said, don't let this happen. Don't let this become another Cold War, which clearly we're in.
Yeah.
I think had Donald Trump not been reelected, we could have said, look, this is a one-off. America always has an isolationist, know-nothing group in it that doesn't understand, has no understanding about how their own security and material well-being is dependent on our alliances, because they're not capable and they don't care about connecting the dots from,
it's a luxury for them to care.
Yes. Right. It's what's that great line about Americans treat foreign policy like the plumbing. It just works, and they only notice it when the basement's full of water,
Right.
But what's clearly been going on, especially since the Anchorage summit, and this is my guess. I've said this a few times to folks now, that my guess about what happened in Anchorage is that they got off the plane and Trump said, I want to talk to you. I want to talk. I got to do the accordion.
Right.
I want to talk to you about some things, and we got to stop this war. And I think what Putin did was close the door. He said, no, I'm going to talk. You're going to listen. This is how it's going to go. This is what I want. This is the way it's going to be. And Trump, of course, walked out afterwards and said, well, it's up to Zelensky, and he's going to give up territory. And then, of course, the Europeans have to come rushing over to say, it's good what you did. It's always that Twilight Zone episode. Right? It's good what you did, Anthony. But how about not wishing Zelensky into a cornfield, And so I think what's been happening ever since Anchorage is that Putin has realized I'm in control here. I am running this show. The Americans are not going to lift a finger. And I think the Poland incursion, which I will admit, in the first hour, which is why I don't like to ever tweet or talk about anything in the first hour of anything, good rule we all learn. I said, okay, if this is a handful of drones, it could be a mistake. They launched 415, 4 or 5 of them go off target. That can jamming, a lot of
Sure, a lot of
going on in
externalities. Yeah,
right. 19 drones.
No,
that's not a mistake. And
No.
that, I think that's an old Kremlin tactic. It's an old Kremlin message that says we can reach out and touch you, and the Americans won't do a damn thing.
Right. It is interesting to me that you're seeing a lot of NATO air now pushing over toward Poland. You've got both the French and the Brits and the Italians all pushing air assets over there, which I think is as good as they can signal in terms of determination. It would probably be send a better signal if there were more American air assets a little closer up. But I know we don't want to escalate. Trump doesn't want to escalate because he doesn't want to get reprimanded by the Home Office.
It's interesting if I can just point out, you bring up escalation. This was something that I worried about a lot in the first 6 months because I said,
right,
a wounded, humiliated Putin is a dangerous Putin. I mean, he doesn't know what he's doing. This idea that guy plays, he's a chess master, and
he's a bullshitter.
Right,
he's a bullshitter. Yeah,
and a bullshit artist, but a dangerous thug. And so I said, don't do anything that could lead to not intentional escalation, but somebody doing something stupid. Like I've never worried about, you and I both worked on this stuff back in the glory days, right? The old days. I don't think any of us ever got out of bed saying someone's going to start World War III today. I think the thing we always worried about was someone's going to do something stupid whose consequences they couldn't foresee that will then be misinterpreted by somebody else who's only a human being who's going to screw this up. And the next thing you know, it's this Rube Goldberg disaster machine, goes into effect. I think at this point, it's been 3 years. Putin claims he keeps trying to play the escalation card. I don't think that there's anything. I'm a lot less worried about escalation now.
Yeah, I agree.
3 years ago, and I think we got to be more aggressive about things.
Well, I mean, I look at Trump's demand on NATO this week after his response to NATO was to say you have to all stop buying Russian oil and natural gas. Which, by the way, that'd be great if they did. It would solve the war very quickly, I think, if they did. But he wasn't doing that to really get to a solution, was he? He was doing that to buy more time, another 2 weeks for Putin.
Well, and also they're already doing it. The Europeans have already cut down drastically the amount of gas and oil. Now, I hate this is where the old the old Reaganites can say, "We told you so. We warned you back in the 80s.
We told you about Nord Stream. We told you
not to buy this stuff. We told you not to put that gas pipeline through Germany." Yep. But you know what? That's water under the bridge. That's gas under the pipeline, water under the bridge at this point. The Europeans are already doing it. What he additionally did what was the thing about Chinese? You have to put like 100% tariffs on China.
On China.
Nobody's going to, and he did this intentionally to say, I'm willing to do sanctions if you guys can, leap a tall building in a single bound and reverse gravity.
Cook a perfect souffle,
Yeah, these are utterly nonsense conditions that he knows no one is going to meet.
Yeah, let's play that clip we've got of this, guys.
Up its aggression, President Trump is raising new conditions for tough sanctions on Moscow.
But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Trump saying he'll sanction Russia, but only if NATO countries do the same.
I know that Trump has a fundamental understanding that Americans will never do the due diligence, right, to look at Europe's current sanction regime on Russia, which in many cases is much tougher than ours.
And also, we are the largest economy in the world.
Yes.
One would think that, I mean, what's he saying? Well, I'll do it if Slovenia does it.
Right. And Luxembourg needs to step up.
Right. And, exactly. Luxembourg, those cheese-eating Luxembourgians better get their act together, or else Russia's going to run. I mean, it's not only inane, it's embarrassing.
Right.
We used to be, the eyes of the world would turn to us during a crisis like this and say, you Americans, you're not perfect, but you always do the right thing. Where are we going with this? And instead, now we have, this.
And there was a sort of shorthand understanding for years that Trump has this whatever obsession, relation, whatever you want to call it about Russia. But what concerns me now is I'm seeing increasingly J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and others, and not just to keep Trump happy, they're developing a corollary sort of pro-Russian strain that's running through a lot of their statements. I mean, J.D. Vance is a much more articulate defender of Russia than Trump is. Trump's always like, Putin and I have a great relationship. J.D. Vance is making that sort of Bannonite argument that we have to be on Russia's side because they're not the decadent West.
Right. Which tells you several things. First of all, Rubio, I think, knows better because Rubio for years has had access to classified information, Senate hearings. He knows better. And I suspect that the book tour, when all this is over, is all the things I did to try to not let...
You would never believe what I did behind the scenes to make America safe.
Exactly. Vance, on the other hand, first of all, it's a reminder that Vance doesn't know a lot about a lot.
Correct.
He is not, he's an intelligent man, but he's not experienced, not particularly well versed in any of this stuff.
Right.
But it also tells you how much of his worldview he imbibed through the kind of Silicon Valley tech bro entrepreneurial class that doesn't really see, it's amazing, Rick, that you and I have had to listen to people screaming about globalists who don't think about borders and see the world as one big market and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But that is the worldview that shaped Vance. And you 100%. Can see it here. And I think the only thing that, as you point out, the other thing I was going to say that this reveals about Vance is that he doesn't know anything about Russia. I mean, Russia is an intensely decadent country. America, right? America's like a Grant Wood painting compared to Russia.
Right.
But because he doesn't know anything about that, has never been there, has never, gotten outside of the motorcade in Moscow.
Never done the reading.
Right. So hasn't ever just walked in a Russian village somewhere and sort of seen how decadent Russia really is, that he thinks that somehow, he's looking at white Christian Orthodox, Russia and, San Francisco.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's a really good point, Tom, that he's sort of drunk on the Kool-Aid of the Silicon Valley markets philosophy. I don't think he's a Duganite. There is a strain of that in the American right, but
he's not sophisticated enough to embrace that. He hasn't. It would take a lot more kind of depth of understanding to be that screwed up.
And the only thing that he has in common with a lot of Russian operations is that he's changed his name a lot of times. So, yeah. But I want to, we see this sort of clumsy flailing around about Russia, but there's another. Right.
I just love this.
The first I've read that tweet 100 times and it never gets less like FML.
Well, I'm just you and I are of a certain age, and the minute I saw that tweet, I immediately heard it in Cliff Clavin's voice. What's with Russia? Remember when Cliff decides to be a stand-up comic? He's like, "What's with Russia violating theirs? What's up with that?"
Here we go.
I mean, it's like watching a comedian bomb. Hey, folks, what Russia violating? What's up with that?
What's up with that?
Get off the stage.
And the room is just like vaguely uncomfortable.
Right. It's just all you hear is the clinking of glasses and the rustling of silver.
Try the deal. But I it's interesting because Trump obsesses saying all the time, I've ended all these wars, which ask India and Pakistan, and they're like, what? this party of no more wars is certainly starting to ramp up. And historically, these work out really well for us. Wars in humid, semi-third world countries where other great powers can step in and cause trouble. We're getting into a war with Venezuela, whether we like it or not. And I don't like Venezuela's odds. I think it won't go well for them. But we have now sunk a second alleged narco-terrorist boat. On a scale of 1 to Gulf of Tonkin, where do you find this whole thing?
It's an unfair comparison. The Gulf of Tonkin was an attempt to drag a fig leaf over something. And also
right.
The first Gulf of Tonkin incident probably happened.
Was it? Yeah, right.
Maybe the second one was a little shakier, but it was at least an attempt to rationalize military action. This is just Trump saying, I don't like drug pushers.
Right.
Execute them on the high seas. That's not a legal order. That's not.
And this is a question that I don't think, and I think you're absolutely correct. It is extrajudicial. It is way, way, way outside the bounds of UMCJ. But I don't think we're in a world where the three players in this little dance down there, Marco Rubio, Rich Grenell, and Pete Hegseth, are going to hesitate to do much more in this.
They were chosen specifically to do what they're told.
Right.
There is no, Mark Milley or Jim Mattis or anybody else who's going to walk in and say, Mr. President, this is actually not just a bad idea, but illegal under international and probably under domestic American law.
Yeah.
And you really shouldn't be ordering guys to just murder people on boats. There's no, for people that are not well versed in this stuff, let's just take 1 second to say there are circumstances under which you can blow up these boats.
Right.
If they fire on you first, for example, you are allowed to act in self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
If they are full of, bombs headed for Miami, and you have actionable intelligence that says that these people are going to, blow up Key West the minute these boats make it to where they're going.
Sure.
And you can't stop them and you can't interdict them. But to blow them up because they have drug dealers on them without interdiction, without arrest, without telling them to turn back, without doing all the things,
right.
There's a thing in international law, and then I'll get out of my professor mode. There's also a thing in international law called the Caroline test, named after, ironically enough, a boat named the Caroline, that says in order to take this kind of action, the threat has to be instant, overwhelming, leaving no moment for deliberation. You really have to kind of show the international community, look, I didn't have a choice here.
Right. They opened the missile bays,
Right. Or they took the tarps off of a machine gun.
Yeah.
Or they set up a guy picked up a rocket launcher.
Right.
None of that. They can't. There is nothing that they. And Trump's attitude is, and look, we're the most powerful country in the world. His attitude is, we don't care because we don't have to. But this is going to bite us in the ass down the line. This is a bad idea. And I say that as somebody who, I keep bringing up the example of blowing up those guys in Yemen. Remember, there was a car that had 6 guys in it. And we said, this was right at the beginning of the operations in the Middle East, where we said, hey, with 6 Al-Qaeda guys, we're operating under an AUMF. We have good intelligence on who they are. They are members of an organization that has declared war on us explicitly. Right. And where there's no way we can get into Yemen and stop these guys, and they're headed for the battlefield and they're up to no good.
Yep.
This is different.
Yeah, this feels like they're not even. This feels like the intelligence behind this is basically like, oh, they're boats. We're gonna shoot at them. They must be Trinidad smuggling fentanyl into America.
This also feels like it was done on the very important international principle of not talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
100%. The Epstein files being the key trigger for any military action. But Trump has he sort of declared it a success. Let's play that. Let's play this clip because it's just classic late stage Trump.
There are no ships in the ocean anymore. We're seeing that there's like no ships, when the first one we went, there were hundreds of boats. Now there are no boats. I wonder why. meaning no drugs are coming across, probably stopping some fishermen too. I mean, to be honest, if I were a fisherman, I wouldn't want to go fishing. Just a nice, let's take a little trip, because I'd say, man, if maybe they think I have drugs downstairs. I don't want that. I think the fishing business probably been hurt, but no, there are literally no boats. This was a boat, and we were surprised to see it. Now, what?
Hey, we stopped a bunch of poor people from fishing.
Right. Congratulations, Mr. President. You done good.
If that's even true, when he says, well, there are no boats anymore on the...
Right.
Okay. I mean, I doubt that's true, but...
Having spent some time assigned to a counter-narcotics task force once upon a time in my life, I promise everybody in America, if you are an aficionado of either cocaine or fentanyl, it will still be here. This has... The insatiable demand in America will be met with an insatiable amount of creativity to get drugs to this country. If they're not on boats, they're on drones or whatever.
And markets work.
Markets
which
do
means
work.
that the drugs will be a lot more expensive. We go through this every so often to see if, I mean, all the way going back to the days of the French Connection.
Sure.
Let's stop.
I sat in rooms where people talked about how do we blow up every bridge and road in and out of the Upper Hulaga Valley without, and it was all, cooler heads always prevailed, but there are no cooler heads around this process anymore.
But I also think that this is just, aside from the let's not talk about Jeffrey Epstein thing,
right?
He is trying, between this and troops in the street, he is trying to establish that what Article 2 really means,
right,
is I can do anything I want with the U.S. military, and they must obey my orders, and those orders are always going to be lawful and executed. And right. I think, there's so many reasons he's doing this, none of which are good and none of which are for the actual health and well-being of the United States.
Tom, again, as you said, you and I both sort of been around this world a bit, and I wonder, I keep wondering, I keep hoping that at some point somebody is going to say, no, Mr. President, being on the Joint Chiefs is an honor, but I cannot do this for you. I will not do this for you. I am deeply concerned. What do you, I mean, the senior officer class right now seems to be in a state of kind of moral capitulation to this guy.
I've been worried about that ever since the whole, that whole shit show at Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
And, saying, where's the Secretary of the Army? I wrote a piece back then called The Silence of the Generals.
Yeah.
Where's the Army Chief of Staff? Where is the Secretary of the Army? Where are these people who are supposed to say, I can't serve you under these circumstances? Now,
right.
Look, people need to understand, and you know this very well, Rick, it's very easy to tell for civilians, and we used to talk about this as like case studies when I taught at a war college. Very easy for civilians to say, well, you should just pull your stars off and throw them on the table. Okay, that, first of all, you can do that, and it won't stop anybody.
Right. They'll find another.
There's always another guy. The president can say, fine, you're the new 3-star, pending Senate approval, which, is so hard to get under the Senate.
Oh, I know. It's so difficult.
But there are people in government, I mean, the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of the Army, to say, I cannot be the SecNav while you're telling the CNO to murder people on the high seas.
Right. Can't
be involved with it. Now, fortunately for Trump, he chose a SecNav who has no military experience, no Navy experience, has no, give the Trumpers credit this time around, Rick. They learned from the first term.
They did.
Don't pick people who know what they're doing. Don't pick people with a spine. Don't pick people with any moral reservations about anything. The irony here is that the guy who's the poster boy for this, Kash Patel, might be the first to lose his job because they're turning on him so fast. But, he knew exactly, like, Pete Hegseth is not there to be a Secretary of Defense.
No.
Pete Hegseth is there to be a heat shield to soak up anything Donald Trump says and transmit that to the force. And then people can say, well, I was ordered to do it by the SecDef.
It is a dangerous world, folks, and I hope you will forgive Tom and I for going off into the foreign policy ether a little bit tonight. But it is important, I think, for everybody to keep their eye on the fact that externalities happen outside of the daily chaos of social media. And foreign policy externalities are the most dangerous and the most consequential in many, many, many ways. So, Tom Nichols, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Tell folks where they can find your writing and find you on social media.
Well, first, amen to your point about foreign policy, Rick. That's the thing could get us all killed in a heartbeat tomorrow. They can find me on at The Atlantic, where I'm a staff writer, and Radio Free Tom, both on X and on Blue Sky. I tend to only post on X and argue on Blue Sky. So if you talk to me, I tend to be sort of among the more sane folks. That's pretty much where I am these days.
All right. Well, Tom, thank you for joining us tonight on the strategy session. I really appreciate it. Folks, we will be back again next Tuesday with the full cast of characters to get back onto the more noisy domestic business of a failing economy and the continuing Epstein cover-up. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you all. We'll see you again next time.